What is up, people? Today we're talking Kaytranada, and I'm super excited because I am a huge fan of his. He is an amazing producer with a very distinct, soulful, funky vibe, and I'm going to be breaking down that track that you just heard and show you really the three main elements you need to nail that Kaytranada style. But before we do, please do remember hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let's hop right in. All right, so BPM is at 108 for this one, and before we actually start with number one of our three main elements, I want to get a simple kick drum pattern in here, and I want to show you just how far off the grid this is. This is basically just a 4 on the floor kick pattern, nothing too spectacular. But if you look here, you can see how far off the grid these all are. It's going to really give it that humanized feel that Kaytranada is really known for. Let's talk about the first element we need for that Kaytranada vibe, and that's going to be some jazzy, soulful chords. And I have a couple music theory tricks to make it really simple so that you can do this from scratch yourself. Okay, so I've got the piano roll open and it's set to F minor, but I will get to that in just a second. The first music theory hack is using syncopation. If you don't know what that is, I have a whole video on it. I can link that above. But basically, it is using strong and weak beats or off beats to create a rhythmic pattern. And so what I like to do sometimes is actually just use the root note of whatever scale I'm using. And I'm just going to play and in my head kind of hum a rhythm and mark them in where I feel like the next chord change should happen. So this way I'm not bogged down with what chords I'm using. I just have the rhythm and then I can go through and create the chords afterward. And that second music theory hack is using what are called borrowed chords. So if we're in F minor for this one, which we are, we can borrow chords or use chords from the F major scale, which is the parallel key. So this first chord I'm actually going to leave as the one chord. I'm going to make these all 7th chords, which means I'm going to drag this up. That's our 3rd, our 5th, and our 7th. So this is our one chord of our F minor scale, the F minor 7. The second chord, we're going to get interesting here. I'm going to drag this down to the B flat, which is the 4 of this scale. And this would be a B flat minor in the F minor scale. But it doesn't sound that good. It sounds kind of boring. So what I'm going to do is raise this 3rd and raise the 7th as well. And now it's a B flat major, which is a lot more interesting in this scale. And again, that is that borrowed chord. We're borrowing it from F major because that is the 4 chord in the F major scale. All right, I'm going to do very similar with this next chord. So let's drag this down to the 2. So this will be G. And in the minor scale, the 2 chord is always a diminished chord, which you can hear does not sound very good. So what I'm going to do is actually borrow the 2 chord from the major scale as well. And for this one, all I have to do is raise the 5th by a semitone. And now we have a G minor 7, which is a lot nicer. So for this one, I'm actually going to drag this down to the B flat as well, except this time I'm going to keep it in scale and just leave it as a B flat minor 7 chord. And then for these last two, I'm just going to repeat that B flat minor 7 one more time. And this one I'm actually going to make a C minor 7, which is the 5 chord of this. And the 5 chord is usually kind of a good turnaround chord to go back to your 1 chord. And the last thing I'm going to do to make this flow a little bit better is use an inversion of this F minor chord. So I'm going to take that top note, the 7th, and actually take it down an octave. So now it's an F minor 7 over E. All right, that progression is sounding really, really nice, jazzy, smooth. So let's go ahead and add some processing to these keys real quick. A really, really simple EQ, just a high pass and a high shelf to dampen any of those higher frequencies. And pretty much everything is going to have a really, really prominent sidechain compression to the kick just to get that vibe going. And next I just duplicated those chords over and layered them with this faded keys preset, which is a drift instrument preset. And the last layer is a very bright, higher layer, and I made this an operator from scratch, and I'll show you how I did that real quick. So I left the first oscillator as a sine wave and just played around with the envelope a little bit. Then I came up here to the second oscillator, and I left this in FM mode, meaning that that second oscillator is actually going to modulate the first. And then I just changed that second oscillator to a square 3 wave. And the filter settings over here, I left it at 12, changed it to MS2, so it's a little bit grittier, has a little bit more drive to it. So some of the important things that are actually shaping the sound, I came into this envelope option, and you can hear that's really harsh, so I took it down to about -48, and then this pitch envelope is actually kind of helping it slide up to that note a little bit. So always when I'm layering synths, I go back and start with the first one, add the second one in again, add the third one, just one at a time to make sure they're actually adding something to the mix and they're not just fighting and clashing with each other. So I went ahead and grouped those into a bus, just added a glue compressor. I added a saturator just to kind of glue them together even more. And then last I have this flanger effect at about 50% wet. And a lot of Kaytranada's songs, especially a lot of his earlier works, you can hear a flanger on a lot of things. You can hear it on his drums, on his synths, just kind of glues it together and gives it that kind of underwatery feel. Second element we need to nail that Kaytranada vibe is a melodic, funky bass line. And the bass sound that you choose as well as the pattern that you play are both equally important here. So this is the bass pattern I came up with, and I'm going to play it with the kick because the relationship between the kick and the bass is really, really important to get that groove. And if I overlay the bass with the chords that I'm playing, you can see that we're not just playing the root note. We're actually playing a lot of the notes in the chords. We're playing these color notes. So we're playing the third, the fifth, the seventh even. And this is adding a lot of harmony, a lot of melody to our bass line to make it more interesting and more full. And let's talk about the sound design for this bass, because I made this from scratch using Ableton's operator, which is honestly like a secret powerhouse in Ableton. It's amazing for making basses, pads, pretty much anything you can think of. But what I did was I started off with a custom sine wave. So check this out. If you didn't know this, you can come in here to the oscillator and actually draw in the harmonics that you want. And this is super, super helpful when you're making basses to make a kind of square wavy looking saw wave is what I've done here by drawing in those alternating harmonics. And then I came in and just shaped the envelope. So this is more of a plucky sound. So it doesn't have a lot of sustain. And then I came up to this next oscillator and changed it to a square 16 and also kind of more of a pluckier envelope, but there is a little bit of sustain to this one as well. And then I just came over here to the filter, changed it to 24 so it's a little bit steeper, left it on clean, drug down the frequency to about 2.29 kilohertz. It does have quite a bit of resonance on it. And the real secret here is using drum bus as a saturator. And this is giving it a lot of distortion and just making it sound a lot more full and giving it a lot of that grit. And lastly, the third element you need for that Kaytranada vibe are some humanized textured drums. So we already talked about the kick drum and how unquantized that is. A lot of Kaytranada's songs, he has some really, really nice wide sounding claps. So this one already has some nice stereo width, and I'm going to use that along with this one, which is a bit more mono. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pan one slightly to the left, and I'm going to pan the other one slightly to the right. And then what I'm going to do is come in here and layer them. So they are layered, but they're not playing at the same time. You can see they're offset, and it's giving it some really, really nice stereo width. Next, I went on to Splice and found a percussion loop that I really like the texture of. But I didn't really feel like the groove of the percussion loop actually matched my song. So I actually took that loop and put it into a simpler in Ableton, chopped it up and found some slices and kind of rearranged it to fit the vibe of my song. And just to finish the drums off, I grabbed the shaker loop, came down here to the beats warping mode and drug down some of the transient information here. And all the drums together sound like this. And once I was happy with the instrumental, I kind of just wanted to add a vocal to finish it off. So I went ahead and just grabbed this little loop, added some EQ there, a de-esser, a little bit of glue compression, and then I just created this audio rack at the end here. So I have the dry signal, I have a Valhalla vintage verb that's 100% wet, and it's also sidechained to the dry vocal, so it's ducking it every time she's actually saying something. And then I have this delay that I came in and automated the dry wet knob. So kind of in between those phrases, so it's kind of picking up the last word or so of every phrase, and it's just kind of delaying and filling in those spaces. And that is going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed, please do remember, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really helps my channel out, and I really do appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.
Patient when I'm in my head.